Short story, A Matter of Interpretation, by M. Elizabeth Ticknor. The Dragonspire Mountains swallowed up the stars in the eastern half of the desert sky. Sirs tended the fire at his master's campsite in an attempt to stave off the darkness. He had never seen anything so massive or imposing. He wished that his master, Tyrion, had not insisted on making camp in the shadow of their previous evening. The sun-bleached peaks warped the wind into howls that echoed through the air like ravenous beasts. Tyrion exited his tent at dawn and motioned for Sirs to approach. "Sit. I want to examine your seam work." The runic tattoos that covered Sirs' body glowed white as Tyrion's command took root. Sirs grunted in acknowledgement and knelt at his master's feet. Even kneeling, Sirs' head was parallel with Tyrion's shoulders. Had Tyrion not taken on the mantle of necromancy, Sirs felt he would have made an excellent tailor. He had composed Sirs from the choicest parts of a dozen different corpses, woven together with silk thread and spellwork. Sirs did not understand why he had been driven to such gruesome work, but he appreciated the craftsmanship required to accomplish such a daunting task. Tyrion let out a satisfied sigh as his hands finished tracing the stitches that held Sirs' limbs together. "Good, good. How is your healing? Place your hand in the fire." Sirs grimaced, but did as Tyrion commanded. He sucked in a sharp breath as his hand began to burn. He forced himself to hold it steady until the smell of cooking flesh reached his nostrils. "Now pull it out." Sirs followed Tyrion's bidding. Dead nerves tingled back to life as his injury healed over and left fresh, unscarred skin. "Excellent. You're complete. Or as complete as I can make you. Come morning, we'll put you to work." Sirs gave a single nod. Tyrion preferred him to speak only when necessary, but this seemed important enough to merit a question. "What should you have me do?" "I would have you tear down the gates of Rosafio." The implicit promise of violence made Sirs' scalp prickle. He frowned. "Why?" "Because the Valdians are losing the war, and I've been hired to change that. Taking Rosafio should turn the tide. Once you destroy the gates and rout the guards, the Valdian army can take the pass and solidify their supply lines. Lord Arena will grant me lands and a title once the job is done." Sirs' neck and shoulders muscles clenched. Over the last few weeks, Tyrion had taught him a great deal about war and strategy. The lessons had been grim and unsettling. "I do not want to harm anyone." Tyrion threw his hands up in the air. "By the rolling havoc! You're not supposed to want anything." He knitted his brow together and shook his head. "I suppose that's what I get for designing a golem intelligent enough to create adaptive strategies. The anatomists of Houth Arif say the brain houses the soul. Perhaps I should have used an animal brain rather than a human one. I am fully functional. My body is strong." "Your body is not what I worry about." "My mind is sound." "Silence!" The command struck Sirs like a slap to the face. His tattoos flared to life and clamped his jaw shut so tightly that it ached. Tyrion glanced at Sirs. "Better." He stood and circled Sirs with narrowed eyes. "Insolence will not be tolerated. You are meant to take orders, not to question them." Sirs stared into the fire. The sudden inability to speak left him numb and hollow. Tyrion might as well have ordered him to rip out his tongue. The village of Rosario pressed tightly against the cliffs and surrounded the only pass between the Dragonspire Mountains for 50 leagues. A pair of blue-flecked granite towers dwarfed the huts and hovels of the common folk. The bloodwood gates that cut off the pass were strong enough to keep an entire Valdian army at bay. They were well manned and designed to withstand massive onslaughts from the outside. They were not, however, fortified against a potential attack from within. Tyrion led Sirs into town at midday, dressed in the fine dyed linens of a merchant. Sirs dragged a wooden cart that contained Tyrion's traveling supplies as well as 24 bolts of cloth should they need to validate their cover story as textile merchants. Sears' muscles burned with every step as he strained to slow his pace. He lurched onward, shoulders slumped, head hung low. His tattoos flickered every time he hesitated. He hoped the glow was dim enough in the daylight that Tyrion would not take notice. Tyrion strutted confidently beside him, spine military drill straight. "Don't shamble so. I built you better than that." The tattoos that covered Sears' body blazed. The compulsion to obey was overwhelming. Sears straightened his posture and steadied his gait, but he kept his pace methodical and slow. The stares of the people in the street prickled and needled at Sears as he walked. Even slumped forward, cloaked and cowled, he stood taller than anyone in the crowd. His shoulders stretched broad as the yokes of the oxen that pulled the traders' wagons. Tyrion surveyed Rosafio like a wild cat ready to pounce. "Smash the gates, then knock down the towers. If anyone gets in your way, kill them." Sears' tattoos flared. He ground his teeth and clenched his fist tightly around the cart's handle grips. But no matter how much he focused, his legs drove him forward. Sears abandoned the cart as he approached the gates. His muscles rippled as he pushed against the doors that were meant to be pulled. Steel-braced wood creaked, groaned, and splintered. Sears pressed relentlessly against the doors until the gate's hinges cracked, then snapped under the pressure. Cries of alarm rang out across the plaza as the two halves of the gate toppled to the ground. A trio of guards rushed Sears at the base of the northmost tower. He tossed them aside like rag dolls. His tattoos flared and urged him to follow through on ensuring their demise. But he focused on the need to collapse the towers. The guards were not presently in his way, and the orders for destruction had come first. He would worry about whether or not he was required to kill them later. The tower's stonework was solid and well fitted. If Sears charged it full force, he would be lucky to even crack the stone. There was, however, a wooden door, and in the end, all doors were meant to be opened. Sears rammed against the door, shoulder first, until he broke it down. Guards clambered down the stairs as he ducked into the room. He ignored them. They were not yet in his way. There, the support beams. Sears slammed into the closest beam with all of his weight. It cracked from the force. One of the guards charged him, but he sidestepped and rammed the man into the wall. He tossed the bloody guard into the arms of his fellows and stalked toward the next beam. The guards bolted for the exit. Sears gave them time to flee. When he was certain they had all evacuated the tower, he struck the remaining support beams hard enough to shatter them. The tower collapsed around him. Sharp, jarring agony surged through his body as a deluge of stone, wood, and mortar poured down on his head and shoulders. His back snapped under the strain. The crushing weight of death enveloped him. Sears bit back an agonized scream as Tyrion's magic dragged him back to sentience. Bones and flesh attempted to knit together despite the unrelenting press of rubble above him. Bones healed in excruciating wrong positions, then broke again every time he tried to move. Sears thrashed and writhed, desperate for relief. After what seemed like an eternity, he gained enough freedom to crawl out from the debris. He lay on his back, panting as the bones snapped into their proper positions and muscles slithered into place around him. A surge of panicked voices enveloped him. "It can't be human! No one could survive that! The whole tower landed on his head! Look at its arm!" Sears' shoulder popped back into place as he staggered to his feet. A dozen guardsmen surrounded him, shields and spears at the ready. They were poised to fight, but their eyes were wide and their limbs trembled. Sears made eye contact with each of them in turn. If he were careful, he should be able to push through the crowd. As long as he could get through, they were not in his way. His body still ached from the tower's collapse. His muscles were barely responsive, his movements jerky. It took most of his energy to brush the guards aside before they surrounded him. The magic-born inclination toward mayhem and slaughter surged through him anew. He clenched his jaw, shook his head to clear it, and pushed on toward the southern tower. Panicked civilians swarmed the road between the towers. Some rushed toward the gates, others sought to flee them, and even more simply stood in place and gawked at the wreckage. Murderous intent surged within Sirs, but he fought it desperately. He did not want to kill. He did not want to kill. He ran down his list of orders. Silence, break the gates, destroy the towers, kill anyone who got in his way. Tyrion couldn't have meant him to be silent forever. Sears' tattoos flared as he bellowed a wordless warning cry toward the crowd. The act of rebellion burned like fire. Sirs charged toward the crowd, yelling all the way. People scrambled to escape his path. Not all of them moved fast enough. Sirs gritted his teeth and slowed down to avoid them. The guards caught up and surrounded him. Their formation was tighter. They glared at him with eyes like steel. Sirs balked. His tattoos seethed with arcane energy. Tyrion's words burned into his mind. The guards were in his way. There was no way through. He had to kill them. He had to. The repercussions of disobedience scorched him like an inferno. Even so, the pain did not compare to the torture of having been trapped alive under the weight of the collapsed tower. If he had pushed through that, he could push through this. White-hot magic blazed from every tattoo and stitched seam. Through the pulsing thrum of energy, he heard one of the guards demand his surrender. He ground his teeth, bowed his head, and placed his hands behind his neck. Tyrion's voice rang out over the throng. "What are you doing? I did not bid you to surrender!" Sirs spotted Tyrion in a matter of moments. He had been blending in with the crowd, most likely playing the part of a panicked citizen. Sirs' stomach clenched with fear. "Kill them! Kill them all!" Sirs howled as the order tore into him. He collapsed to the ground, clutching his head in his hands. He wanted to ease the pain, even if that meant crushing his own skull. He fought the command as it filled his mind with anguish. He could live with pain. He was designed to live with pain. He ground his teeth together and forced himself to weather out the agony. The longer it continued, the more he was able to bear it. He stood and glared at Tyrion. No. Tyrion stared at him, wide-eyed. "What?" Sears roared. "No!" Tyrion flinched and stepped back. He pulled an obsidian orb from the folds of his cloak and began to chant. As he took aim at Sears, 2 guards lunged for him. Tyrion spat a command, and crackling orb of energy enveloped the more muscular of the pair. He fell to the ground screaming as his flesh melted from his bones. His companions swore and backed away. Sears snarled and bore down on Tyrion like a tidal wave. He grabbed Tyrion by the throat before the mage could begin his chant anew. Tyrion dropped his focus orb and scrabbled frantically to loosen Sears' grip. But Sears lifted him into the air with one hand. Tyrion pried at Sears' fingers. He tried to choke out a phrase. An order, a spell, but could not draw enough air to speak. It would be so easy to end it. To snap Tyrion's neck, smash open his skull and watch his brains leak out onto the cobblestones. But Sears did not want to kill. He took a deep breath, then let it out slowly. No. He brought a foot down on the focus orb and crushed it to powder. Then he dropped Tyrion like a pile of wet rags. Tyrion collapsed on the hard-packed earth, gasping and clutching at his throat. The guards glanced between Sears and Tyrion, uncertain of who to target. "Surrender!" the captain bellowed. "Hands on the back of your head!" Sears almost gave in out of sheer exhaustion, but he forced himself to think. Surrender would leave him bound to the will of the guards, perhaps even to the will of Tyrion. He did not want to surrender. He wanted freedom. Sears ran toward the broken gates. Spears whistled through the air after him. Some struck home and embedded themselves into his flesh, but the damage was not sufficient to slow him. He pressed on long after the shattered gates disappeared behind the cliffs. He did not know what lay on the other side of the pass. He only knew that whatever dangers he faced, he would face them of his own volition. Hey everyone, narrator here. That was A Matter of Interpretation by M. Elizabeth Ticknor. I wanted to try a little something different this October, getting to the spooky season and all that. So, over this month, probably over the next couple of weeks, there'll be some different type of stories. They won't really be books or anything like that, but they'll be one-offs and something you can enjoy. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.